Welcome in to another edition of Gold and Black Radio. I'm your host, Derek Schultz. Thanks so much for joining us. Purdue's men's basketball team bounced back with a win, easily defeating an overmatched Marshall team over the weekend at Mackey Arena. But it's all power opponents from here, starting later this week in sunny San Diego. We're going to talk all about it with our go-to hoops guy in Brian Neubert here in just a bit. But first, a thank you to our sponsors that make Gold and Black Radio possible, including Purdue Federal Credit Union, a proud partner of Purdue Athletics and the official credit card for Purdue fans. Boiler Up, East End Grill, and Ripple & Company, two distinctive bistros across the street from one another on the far end of Main Street, the perfect place for your next event. And our pals at the Whitaker Inn for unparalleled comfort and cuisine. Visit the Whitaker Inn. GoldenBlack.com columnist and hoops guru Brian Neubert joins us now as we get set for. I always like these holiday tournaments. You know, I know they've kind of done this like opening day, pseudo opening day thing in college basketball, but to me, Brian, at least when I was a kid, and I don't know if I'm dating myself here because this tournament's been around for a while, but Maui to me was always kind of like the start of the preseason NIT at the Garden into Maui. Like those were the two really big events. And now it just feels like, God, there's a tournament freaking everywhere this week.
That's what TV will do to you.
Yeah.
It's the same reason there's 200 bowl games. If people will watch it over the holidays, they will do it. And it's good for college basketball, though, because it gets people excited the same way all the bowl stuff is probably good for college football, because there's always college football on for people who aren't even watching TV, who just have it on to drown out their in-laws.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably the same thing in college basketball to a certain extent, where when the TV's on, there's always a basketball game on to watch if you're so inclined, unless you're the type of household that likes to put on the Yule log channel and just kind of listen to Christmas music on Thanksgiving.
No, I just have to make it through the 3 hours of the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade because my mom doesn't let anybody touch the remote during that entire time. Yeah, make
That's
sure
how I grew up. That must be
so
an
we do
East
it for
Coast
mom.
thing.
Yeah, I guess so. It's very New York for sure.
And
not
here
much
comes
to dig
Charlie Brown.
Exactly. Yeah. Kids, Santa's right around the corner. Not much to dig into here with a, kind of a ho-hum 80-45 win over Marshall. I guess ho-hum is better than oh no. But we did see a lineup shift, of course, that at least seemed to pay off in a 40-minute sample against a lesser non-conference opponent. But Brian, what did you think overall of how the pieces fit, particularly with the promotions of Colvin and Heidi into the starting lineup?
Well, I have a joke I need to keep wearing out. I just want to thank Matt Painter for giving us something to talk about after that game. Otherwise, there would have been nothing. No, it's kind of the starting five that I figured ever since last April Purdue would roll with this season. It's five of your best players, if not your five best players, in addition to five of your six experienced players, all out there together in a lineup that makes some measure of logical sense. So I figured that's how Purdue would start the year. I think Matt Painter wanted to give traditional size an opportunity to establish itself as part of its base lineup. I think Matt Painter also was aware of issues that could present themselves if Purdue played opponents that might pressure you. Thus, you would want that third guard, that Lance Jones type of guy out there at that three position, as opposed to Miles Colvin, who has a lot of ability and is a very talented player, but also is not necessarily a true ball handler. I think Colvin's development into more of a two-way player. He's rebounding now, and he's guarding people. He's come a long way from last season. Kind of made this possible. Again, he's not the ball handler that those two freshman point guard type players are, but he checks the other boxes, and he's also a potentially big time shooter and a more athletic type of guy. Who, when he applies himself as a rebounder, can really be productive there too. And the fact he's doing that, and he's been pretty good defensively this season, really good relative to where he was, I think kind of made this possible. That you weren't getting a whole lot from size. You weren't a great rebounding team anyway, and you're not going to be a great rebounding team this way. But you might be a really, really good offensive team this way. And I think it was just kind of the pragmatic way to kind of look at things that, hey, if we're not going to be a dominant defensive team with rim protection as a result of playing size, and we're not going to be a great rebounding team, let's just go all in on offense and let's put the best offensive lineup we can find out there. And I think that's what they're doing. I think Trey Kopp and Ren's going to find some really good matchups at center. I think Camden Heidi's going to be unlocked by this. I think you've seen him have a couple really big games, and I think it's Purdue's best chance to be as good as they can be this year.
Yeah, Brian, you talk about going all in on offense, and the people that had been kind of banging the table for, say, somebody like Colvin, or even somebody like Heidi. I mean, you see what these guys can do athletically, and the potential for real offensive plays, right? Like the Heidi dunk last year against UConn, or anytime Colvin gets the ball, it feels like he could just take off and put it on somebody's head. But this can't happen without the progress that they've made, notably what Colvin has made on the defensive side of things, right? I mean, like this conversation about having him be in the starting lineup wouldn't have happened if he was still guarding at the level that he was guarding last year. Am I correct?
Correct. There were, I think, three reasons why Jakari Harris opened the season as a starter over Miles Coleman. One, Jakari Harris earned it. He was good. He was really good in the summer. Two was that ball handler factor I mentioned before. Purdue wanted that third ball handler out there for when people decide to trap the ball out of Braden Smith's hands. And then three, he guards. He's your best perimeter defender, or viewed as your best perimeter defender. The fact that Colvin moved himself into a place where he was taking on those assignments that Jakari Harris was starting the game on, when Jakari Harris came out and showed Purdue he could handle them, or at least be competitive in those situations, and was going to apply himself. I think that's what ultimately made this possible. As I said before, I think the cool part of this too, from a button pushing perspective, if that's the proper term, is Miles Colvin wasn't handed this, right? If he was just going to become a starter by simple virtue of returning, it would have been by default. Mm-hmm. But he earned this, and by showing Purdue that he could be the player he hadn't previously shown Purdue he would be this season, and that has to, perhaps be a little bit more motivation for him, perhaps a little bit more self-satisfaction, a little bit more maybe confidence. Confidence is never an issue for him, but I would have to think he's a little bit more content with himself right now than he might be had he just started by default. And, the best situation is when you have players earning their stuff, earning what they get. And he earned this. And he's probably never had to earn anything in his career this way, because he's always been more athletic than everyone. He's always been more talented than everyone. He's always had, the pedigree that no one else had, and sure, stuff like that. For him to have actually developed into a more substantive, more winning player, and now being recognized for it, rewarded for it, if you will, I think that's probably a pretty positive thing.
This balance here that Matt Painter's trying to strike, where you're maximizing strengths now and trying to kind of hide weaknesses, and sort of living with the results, especially when they get into conference play. Are there just going to be some nights where, look, they get killed on the glass, and that's just the cost of doing business, because this still puts them in the best position to win, even if it opens them up on that end, rebounding wise?
Well, Purdue has closed games this way before, and they did a pretty good job when they needed to rebounding. And I think they just played hard. I think they just tried really hard. And that's the story now, is you have to overachieve. I think you have to make sure everybody is conscious of rebounding. You got to be physical, even if you're not necessarily quote unquote physical players. Everybody's got to be conscious of defensive rebounding. You don't have Ross-Ade there anymore blocking out the sun and blocking out the whole other team. You just have to do it as a fivesome. And I think when Purdue has really needed to be a good rebounding team, the end of the Alabama game, parts of the Marquette game, I think they just tried really hard. And that's what they're going to have to do all along. That's not to say Purdue didn't have to try hard last year, because Ross-Ade and Mason Gillis played as hard as anybody. But they also were very different animals from what Purdue has on this team right now. So I think the effort level Trey Kopp-Ren gives every game is going to matter. I think you want to make sure you keep him out of foul trouble. You want to make sure you don't wear him down physically. But I think him, and I think the energy levels Camden Heide and Miles Colvin play with in the front court too are really going to matter, because when you have really athletic guys who have grown man bodies the way they do, it's all up to energy and effort. There's no reason those guys can't be really good rebounders. And you've seen these last couple of games when those guys have really taken it to heart. I can't say Heide didn't last season, but Colvin didn't. Heide and Colvin both have these last couple of games really taken it to heart. They've really, really been productive as rebounders. So that's kind of the story from here on out. Everybody's got to kind of do a little bit more, and it has to be a collective effort as opposed to just relying on Zach Edey to just wreak havoc down there.
What do you think of how Willberg played on Saturday, and is he more suited for this role in the interim? For a guy that's really, not that Colvin and Heide aren't, but for a guy that's really finding himself as a player and trying to grow into what Matt Painter and this coaching staff is hoping he'll become.
Yeah, I thought he did some positive things, but I also think he's, starter or not, he was a role guy. I mean, you didn't need all that much from him. You need him to rebound, you need him to dunk, you need him to screen, and you need him to not make mistakes. And I think he's a high energy guy. He's an excitable guy. And I think maybe the pressure of starting these games, perhaps got him going a little bit too fast. I think sometimes when guys come off the bench as opposed to go in the games and empty their tank for a couple minutes and come right back out. And maybe their impact is better in those 5 minutes than it would have been over that first stretch of basketball that they would have played as a starter. But Purdue still might need Willberg this season. I mean, there are going to be games where you might need a big physical presence at the rim, and you're just not going to ask that much of him. And I do think Purdue is going to probably end up moving more in a different direction than playing with traditional size. Had Daniel Jacobson still been available, that might have been different. But I think there are scenarios where you still need Willberg this season. And it's just, when he's in there, you don't need to ask very much of him. And that's been kind of funny. Not funny, but people have tended to single out Willberg in the court of public opinion. And it's like, well, 90% of the scrutiny is going to the guy who holds 10% of the importance. I mean, this is Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyers, Traycoff Moren's team, and their upside lies in Camden Heide and Miles Colvin's development. And those two freshman guards, ready or not, have got to be good for you right away. Caleb First is your veteran big who's going to play two positions probably. Berg is just there because he's big, and they wanted to give Big a chance. And when Purdue lost to Marquette, it seemed like Willberg was the root of all their problems, and turnovers were the root of all their problems. And that wasn't a Willberg issue necessarily. So I kind of felt bad for the kid because he tries really hard. His heart's in the right place. He is young. He is limited as a player, and he's not a guy you need all that much from. But I think they'll probably, I want to say they'll keep him in the rotation long term, but the Marshall game, it looked like it's Traycoff Moren, then it's First. And then if it wasn't a 35-point game, I do kind of wonder how they would have handled that. So I don't know what the future here lies for Willberg, but there might be games where you need somebody to bang with Umar Ballo or some other giant in the Big Ten, and he can go out there for a few minutes at a time, at least give you some size.
Yeah, and hell, eat up some fouls too. I mean, if you really have to do it. I mean, there are all kinds of roles that a backup big like that can play. That's a big body. Wanted to thank a couple more of our sponsors here that makes Gold and Black Radio possible, including Sand Valley Resort. Celebrate all that the wilderness provides this fall and winter at Sand Valley. Experience everything from Thanksgiving dinner, curling and ice hockey, to ice fishing and snowshoeing, and even the restorative benefits of the guided cold plunge in the frozen lakes. Start planning your next Winter Getaway by visiting SandValleyPursuits.com, and the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research, which has a history of innovation and one goal for the future: defeat cancer. Purdue brings together world-class Boilermaker scientists from across the university, conducting cutting-edge research that uncovers new ways to prevent, diagnose, and treat cancer. With your support, cancer research saves lives. Join the fight and donate to the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research today. And, of course, don't forget to sign up right here at goldandblack.com to become a subscriber today. It is Bucket Week. I won't mention what we were talking about off the air, another name for this week with the way that Purdue's season has gone. Brian, we'll leave that to you and I. But obviously, it looks to be set for a one-sided game. I think Vegas has Indiana maybe at 27.5. So a 4-touchdown favorite for the Hoosiers. And, there have been several bucket games. I'm almost 42 years old. Several bucket games in my lifetime where I can remember Purdue could pick its score. The Cam Cameron era, I remember early in the Joe Teller years, I think it was like 52-7 and 55-10 or something in back-to-back years. The final game for Jerry DiNardo, where the rumor always was that Indiana was considering keeping him until he got blown off the field, and I think that game was at Ross-Ade. The 2021 blowout at Ross-Ade was the most recent one, 44-7, I think that score was. Sadly, is this one where Purdue might finally be on the opposite end of one of those, and IU, who's not going to be feeling great coming off that performance in Columbus, can maybe pick its score coming up here on Saturday night?
Well, it certainly looks like it. The way Indiana's played all season, I think you have to give them a ton of credit. I know people bag on their schedule, and that's fair. But easy schedule or not, they are good. They are sharp. They're mistake-free. They're all moving in the same direction. He's really got them organized and giving great effort, and he deserves a ton of credit for that. And if he's not National Coach of the Year, I don't know who is. But no, it certainly looks on paper like one team blows everybody out every week, and the other team gets blown out every week. And it's at their place. It's at the better team's stadium. That other team happens to be coached by a maniac who wants to preen for the playoff decision makers, who wants blood in general, who opened up his tenure at Indiana by declaring that everyone else in the Big Ten sucks, and then consequently wants to prove it. And he has Purdue basically kissing the curb right now, and all he's got to do is step. And I can imagine that he will be wanting to rub this in too. So I don't think they're gonna lay off the gas pedal one bit, and I don't think Purdue should want that. I think Purdue should want their best game to see if they can keep up with them. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but I think that Purdue really is in a tough spot in this game, as they've been in most games this season. And it could very much be every week this season. I have said it can't be that bad, can it? And then obviously Michigan State was a game Purdue could have won. Illinois was a game Purdue could have won. Northwestern was a game Purdue could have won. But like Oregon, Wisconsin, Penn State, Ohio State, 3 of those 4 great teams, admittedly. Notre Dame, 5 of those 6 are great teams. You say to yourself, it can't be that bad, can it? And then it is, if not worse. And this is another one of those games where you say, it can't be that bad, can it? And the best predictor of the future is the past, right? And, if Purdue doesn't do something improbable defensively, they're going to give up a lot of points. And it's hard to imagine Purdue's offense building on Michigan State to a point where they can put up a bunch of touchdowns on Indiana either, without making enough critical errors, sacks, turnovers, things like that, to stay in this game.
And they did show some fight in the second half in East Lansing, but it's going to take a lot more than fight against, I think Michigan State stinks. So, a much better opponent than what you saw last Friday night there in the state of Michigan.
No,
Brian, we appreciate it.
Right. You're absolutely right. Michigan State's not good. Northwestern's not good. Oregon State's not particularly good. And that's what you remember this Purdue football season for. I know you're trying to get out of here, but I got a thought to finish. So
no, go ahead.
That's what you remember this Purdue football season for. It's, You can talk about the schedule all you want. Yeah, it kind of set you up to fail a little bit. Notre Dame, Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, all being great teams. It just so happens Indiana's in that playoff mix too, but it's the not showing up at Wisconsin. It's the not getting it done against Northwestern. It's the not getting it done at Michigan State when you had a chance to win that game. It's the letting it slip away at the end against Illinois, albeit with a very, very bad call that went against you. It's stuff like that. It's the winnable games that just went completely sideways on you that really made this season a failure, more so than the games where you just came in with no chance.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. There's just not a lot of there's not a lot that can happen that makes a potentially 1-11 season feel acceptable, regardless of how it all shakes out. But certainly in a lot of those games, it did not shake out well. Brian, appreciate it as always. And thanks so much for the insight and analysis. And we will tap back into you coming up here next week on Gold and Black Radio.
All right, Derek. Thanks, man.
That's our pal Brian Neubert, and that's our show for this Tuesday. Thanks so much for joining us, and thanks to our great sponsors, including the Purdue Federal Credit Union, the official credit card for Purdue fans, East End Grill and Ripple & Company, two distinctive bistros across the street from one another on the far end of Main Street in Lafayette. The Whitaker Inn, this Midwestern oasis, is perfect for a relaxing staycation or a weekend getaway. Escape from the ordinary at the Whitaker Inn. Sand Valley Resort. Celebrate all the wilderness provides this fall and winter at Sand Valley. Start planning your next winter getaway by visiting sandvalleypursuits.com. And the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research. The Purdue Institute for Cancer Research has a history of innovation and one goal for the future: defeat cancer. Join the fight and donate to the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research today. And of course, don't forget to sign up to become a member for Brian's work, Tom Dienhart's work, Carm and the Saturday Simulcast, Alan Karpick, and everything you need to know historically for Purdue hoops and football. All the best Boilermaker coverage right here at goldandblack.com. We will see you Friday. We'll preview one final football game, the Old Oak and Bucket game. Welcome back, Tom, and the rest of the crew, and also talk more holiday hoops coming up here later on in the week. And we hope that you'll join us then for another edition of Gold and Black Radio here on goldandblack.com. Thanks so much for joining us.